Welcome everyone, and thank you for spending your evening with us tonight. Yes, I am Tony from aNERDgallery, which is a play on the word an art gallery. I'm based in Singapore, and the gallery aims to promote Indonesian textile arts of batik and tenun with textiles that is beyond the exterior beauty. And tonight is one of the many activities that we conduct to promote batik. So about today's session, entitled Wax Your Merlion, is a discussion about identity in Singapore through batik textile. And this is part of the 1+1=Infinity project, which I will share more about later. But first, identity. What is identity? Identity is the way we perceive and express ourselves, and factors and conditions that an individual is born with and we are being labeled as, for example, ethnic heritage or gender. And we are expected to conform to all the definitions to these labels. Of course, this changes throughout his or her life based on their upbringing and experiences. And this identity often influences the way we behave and make decisions in social settings, like who we make friends with, what we wear, and which political stance we take, and so on. And tonight, we will explore how the expression of identity in Singapore is portrayed through batik arts and textiles. All right, so without further ado, I would like to invite our two panelists. The first one is Oniatta. Oniatta Effendi is the founder of Baju by Oniatta and the owner of Gallery Toko Kita, the space in where she is right now. A Singaporean by birth, Oniatta found herself drawn to batik in her frequent visits to different parts of Indonesia. Her personal journeys that resulted in her excessive purchases of batik fabric has since pushed her to share that love for batik with other batik enthusiasts in Singapore through her labels. And our second panelist is Raymond Wong. Raymond is one of the third generation business owners of Rumah Kim Choo and Kim Choo Kue Chang along East Coast Road. Yummy stuff, beautiful stuff to see if you have never been there. So those are the family's efforts to showcase and to safeguard the richness of their Peranakan roots and family's heritage. As the fashion and boutique director of Rumah Kim Choo, Raymond specializes in making sarong kebayas and Peranakan beaded shoes. Of course, paired with batik, they have been showcased all around the world. With a passion to explore and to create innovative textile works, Freeman has also collaborated with Dance Ensemble Singapore by providing them with costumes and related design concepts to be staged in the theaters and for performing arts. So, as I mentioned, this will be a casual conversation. Perhaps we can start with a little introduction about your personal experience with batik, and if you have favorite batik that you want to showcase, feel free to show that to the camera. So, yes. I shall pass the stage to maybe
who first?
Oh yeah, Raymond can start first since you are on unmute.
Okay. Hi, I'm Raymond, and I'm a third generation Singaporean. My Peranakan roots is actually from my paternal grandmother Lee Kim Choo, and personally, I get to know batik since I was young, but I never knew that fabric is known as batik. It's only when I reached secondary school, when I was in Sec 4 doing my O-level arts, and I'm supposed to do batiks. And that one whole year, I'm supposed to research on what is batiks and try to create my motifs for my O-levels project. And that's where I start to find out from my mom and through my paternal grandmother that batik is actually very commonly used in formal functions whenever they have parties. And even when my grandmother, she wore a kebaya, a modern kebaya with a traditional sarong batik. But you'll be surprised that she was so supportive of Singaporean batik that she was actually wearing a sarong with the Merlion motif on top. And she wore that kebaya for my mom's wedding also. Yeah, so when my mom showed me that picture, it really inspired me to want to know more about batiks since I was 16, 17 years old back then. Yeah.
Do you have any personal batik?
For me, I collect quite a lot of batiks, but I preferred more on the pasisir style, Pekat Longgan, Lastan batiks. And one of my favorite batiks is actually this piece from Demak, which is over here. Why I like this piece a lot? Because Demak batiks focuses on a lot of dots, fine details. And this piece over here actually focuses on a lot of goldfishes, which is very Chinese in inspiration, because Chinese feels that when you have a lot of goldfish in a pond, it means more wealth coming. And being Chinese, or I think for most Asians, they like the idea of being wealthy and rich. So like this case, you can see the goldfishes up there. And one thing more interesting is at this part of the batik, you see a Chinese junk.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, a Chinese junk. So this is one of my favorite batiks because it actually shows how meticulous the artist is, and the batik and the batik artisan actually bothered to go and draw the details out for the person who owns this batik. And interestingly enough, because this is a sea theme, you also get to see a lot of designs like seahorses, sea slugs, and a lot more. And this is very typical for Demak batiks, that at the background, they like to draw additional designs and drawing. So it's unlike Pekalongan batiks, which is usually very plain in the background. But for Demak, it's usually very complex, which is something that I like a lot. Yeah.
All right, thank you. How about you?
Yeah.
How's your journey with batik?
My journey with batik has been a very interesting one. I didn't start when I was a teenager. I think, if anything, I had very little appreciation for batik. Just a little bit about my training. I've been a teacher for 21 years, and I didn't teach fashion, nor did I teach textile or history or art history. I was a theater, I am still a theater educator, a drama educator. And the being drawn to batik happened in my 30s. I'm now in my 40s. Because of an obsessive behavior of frequenting Indonesia, family is there, husband goes there to do business. The obsession with buying batik that was piling in a space that was not big enough to store any more things. And then the brand Baju by Oniatta was birthed as a result, because I started buying fabrics and getting friends who were seamstress to put things together. And so I had the first set of Utama pens, which really is an uncreative way of naming a design, Utama being the first and foremost design. So that I had 12 of that in batik chap, the hand stamped variant, because that was all I could afford at that time. And within 7 days, the Utama pens that I kind of created was sold out. And then I didn't know what else to do. And so with this obsession and a vanity to have a range of tulis pieces, I started to get to know craftsmen when I go on my trips to Indonesia. I've not gone to very many places. I'd like to follow Tony one day to his trips to see batik craftsmen. But in the little that I have in Jogja and in Cirebon, as well as in Solo, we make friends and we build relationships with batik makers. And I think that's where the DNA of the work that I do is, where it's strong, in that we build relationships with batik makers and we bring their stories here, and we kind of weave them with my own narratives, because I'm that theater person that is strong with telling stories. So each collection has a story behind it, either the craftsman or my own personal journeys as the person that I am.
How about favorite batik motifs, or a motif that represents you?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I'm a huge fan of the parang, because it is, I am that courageous, that, that warrior kind of a person that I think I am. But at the same time, I think I am also a kawum, someone, if you cut through and see a cross section of me, it is someone who always wants to be berguna, useful and altruistic and give back, as an educator. But then the vanity in me is so in love with the merak ngibing, because I think I'm that peacock that just goes whoosh, I'm so beautiful. But yes, so it's hard. And so these three would be my favoritist.
Nice, the favoritist. Then also like so going from one person. So in your family, how does batik revolves around it?
Me? Oh, my family. Grandma used to wear batik everywhere. I have a photo of her go waterfall. She goes to visit the waterfall and stands at the batu, where the rock is, and poses with the waterfall in the background in a batik sarung and a kabaya, which I think Raymond would be very, very proud of. The kabayas last time were made very, very differently. So I think grandma wore it everywhere, when she sews, when she cooks, when she goes to a waterfall. And I wanted to share this narrative with you. But is this time for stories yet, or do we talk about identities now? Or I tell you the story of this piece of batik, which is really very magical. John Ang, if he's on right now, John Ang made this acquisition for me by some very magical way. What do you see here, guys?
Oh my God. Spider web.
Spider webs. And this is a very old piece. But I wanted to tell you a story about this and grandma, which I've not gone public yet. So I think this is an apt time. I'll write about it soon. Now, when grandma passed away, she had a lot of batiks with her. When grandma passed away, I don't know where the batiks went. Mom had a theory that says, and you know how, when people die, there are family members who will clamor for their goods, right? Whether it's furniture or batik. And so the batiks don't know where. But my cousin and I, we're quite close, held a piece. I don't know whether she has one or more, but she has a piece of batik that is a pagi sore, half. Half of it flowers in dark maroon, and the other half is exactly like this. Exactly. This is not the piece. Exactly. So I borrowed it once and at a presentation to share that was Arwah Nenek, my late grandmother's piece of batik. And then, of course, I had to return it. And, a piece of me was like, okay, grandma, your place is not in my house if my cousin wants to have it back. But, And then one day, John Ang from KL paid a visit to my newly opened gallery Toko Kita, where I sell clothes and talk about batik. And he showed me this without any prompting. He just said, hey, you think this one nice or not? And all these dealers like that, not drug dealers or batik dealer showing all the batik. And I said, hey. And I told him the story of my late grandmother's batik. I said, please make the acquisition for me. When it arrives, I pay you back. It came. Another John came in to deliver John Ang's goods for me. And then we sealed the deal and I brought it home. Now, my father and mother, they live with me. My dad is 83 and is going through early dementia. So he forgets what he said 5 minutes ago. I brought this in to his room. He looked at it and he said, that's my late mother's kain. Your nenek used to wear this, he said. And that just blew my mind, for a man that struggles with his deteriorating memory, a batik that just allowed him to go back in time to remember what his mother wore. This is a keeper. So that's my family for you. We wear it. I think if you watch my brand video, the family wears it almost naturally at a lot of things. But yeah, so that's that story I wanted to tell you about family and batik and this piece that found its way to Singapore. So I think with batik, Raymond, you probably believe this as well, that the batik speaks to you. It would find you. You may go there and say, you want to buy this, you have this amount of money. But if the batiks don't speak to you, all that money don't mean anything.
True. Because sometimes when you see a beautiful art piece, no matter how expensive it is, you just want to spend and just buy it back. Yeah. But if it's fated to be yours, it'll be fated to be yours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question here from Francisca for Raymond. Was the Demak Batik that you showed earlier a vintage or a new piece?
It's actually a vintage piece.
Mm.
Yeah, it's a very old vintage piece. I'm not too sure how old, but I got this this is one of my early pieces in my collection. I think about 12, 13 years ago when I first bought it. Yeah. And how do we know that it's really very old and vintage? Firstly, is the touch. It feels a bit like paper now because it's so old. It still has its old batik smell. And the lines at the edge are very finely drawn. So we more or less would guess that this is actually a very finely done piece over here. Yeah. And surprisingly, a lot of people do not know much about Demak Batik because they will always see Pekat Longgan, Lasem, and Cirebon Batik to be the best in the market. But back then, because Batik is so widely made by different cities, you'll be surprised that Demak has its own style of Batik, which actually was quite popular with the Chinese market back then. Yeah. So and not many books in that how say batik experts that they write, they rarely mention about Demak Batik also, which I find that is such a waste lah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I agree with Francisca that Demak Batik is kind of like inactive nowadays. You hardly hear anyone making batik from Demak. Yeah, that's a little sidetrack. So coming back to our conversation. So yeah, both of you have mentioned with reference to Jogja and Pesisir Pekalongan and Demak and so on. So the question is that, is there batik in Singapore? What is Singapore batik? Singapore batik meh?
Oniatta, you can answer first.
Batik. Raymond also have batik there. Arab also got a lot of batik. So the answer is have. But whether or not that defines the Singapore identity is the big question that is a tough one because I might be ruffling feathers today. So I think I'm going to siam this to Raymond first.
Oh my goodness. I personally feel that in Singapore, there is a batik culture whereby there are a group of people who appreciate batiks and they like to wear it, but they don't do it that often. That culture is not strong. But in terms of identity wise, most Singaporeans would actually, when they talk about batik, the first impression is they want to buy Indonesian batiks because Indonesian produces one of the most extravagantly, intricately drawn batiks from my personal experience when I mingle with my clientele as they come to my shop also. So batik culture-wise, it all depends. For example, like most of my customers are mostly Chinese. When they come to my shop, the batik that they want is colorful batiks. They would want nothing which is brown, black or ochre. So you can see that different batiks cater to different markets in in Singapore actually. Yeah. So it's very hard to say that it's a certain batik that is for everybody in Singapore. It's really very difficult to actually say that. Yep, Oniatta, your turn.
Yes. What do you think, Oniatta?
When you speak about identity, it's a tough one. And we talk about, one of the questions that you posed was within our community, how do we identify ourselves? Even that is a tough one because you know how it is that we are bound by our pink ICs or that has a column that says race, which is a bunch of nonsense. Because in truth, I think my father put Malay so that at that time I can get free education. But in truth, if you really unpack, I mean, one, it doesn't matter what you are, but if you really unpack, I have Javanese roots, I have a grandma from Medan, a grandpa from Palembang, a grandma who's Chinese Indonesian. So how did that even become Malay? I also don't know. But going back, so if we just look generically at Malay and who I am as Malay, and Raymond didn't mention brown batik, people don't like. The association with batik for me as a young Malay girl then was a brown batik that would cover a dead body at a funeral. Because that's how it is when we enter a space after someone has passed away. you see that brown batik. And I think for many years, I have that phobia, like brown batik, mati, deaf, body there. And then the other association with batik within the community, if you watch P. Ramlee films, is the Berkemban, where all the women wash baju, wash clothes at the river, and then they sing some songs, some Malay songs, and move like this in their very nice torso wrap bodies. Very nice, Mehmet, you're doing it very well. The batik Berkemban. That is, for me, what I identify with. And then, of course, there's baju butterfly, which we can get many of those printed variants that call themselves batik in the likes of Juchat Complex, Changi Village.
Butterfly, sorry.
Baju butterfly, those, the ones that like a butterfly.
Kaftan.
Now they call kaftan, designer call kaftan, but the Malay call baju butterfly. And the more torn is, the better, because your mother will never throw a baju butterfly batik, even if it's print, although my mother wears only the chap ones, because the lobang here, the hole makes it more comfortable and airy. So these are the associations for the community, I feel, And so if you ask me, is there an identity where batik in Singapore is concerned? My very controversial answer is no. Because as long as as long as there is an absent batik producing industry in this country, we cannot, for the life of us, lay claim that batik is ours. Cannot. Okay? Maybe we can reclaim it and some elements of it, but it cannot be something that identifies us. Even if you wax your Merlion on the cloth, then the vomit come out like that also. Even if you put Vanda Miss Joachim on it, we must understand that batik is actually a technique beyond just the, people say batik print, that one already my ears spin. Batik, it's, batik print. We must understand that for as long as in the absence of a strong batik producing industry, there's no Singapore batik identity. But we are so strategically positioned that in the past, that is where all these textiles had come in. So we were receiving this with open arms. And so that doesn't mean we cannot be embracing this, but we must acknowledge our neighbors who have done this art. That's my position on things.
Yes, definitely. Probably an identity in terms of what you wear and what you show it, versus creating Singapore identity, stamping Merlions or waxing Merlions and orchids on your batik to make a Singapore identity. Yeah, and my next mostly frequently asked question is the SQ uniform considered Singapore batik? Does that represent Singapore?
Yeah. Oniatta, what's your take about it?
The sad truth is we have been conditioned to see that as batik. The sad truth. Wasn't it some French fellow who did it, right? In 1970 something, Pierre Baumann, is it?
I think Pierre Baumann. Yeah,
70?
Pierre Baumann. 76.
Yes.
1976, yeah.
I can't for the life of me acknowledge that is batik. It is a uniform that is very much inspired by elements of batik in it. It is inspired perhaps by batik. It has given us that identity that we can't deny. The very fitting kebaya and how, it's very flattering to these slim girls that walk down the aisle. But no, my answer is no, Tony.
Well, yeah, definitely good to know to start the discussion going.
Yeah, but for my own personal view, many years back when I was very active with Juchat Community Center, we actually organized a kebaya competition where ladies staying around the Katong East Coast area who are active with the community center would dress in their traditional costumes. Maybe it must be kebayas, and go up on the stage. And being one of the judges, back then with two other Malay judges, we actually saw one lady coming in the SQ uniform and insisted that she must go up on the stage and walk. And we told her that, hey, it's a uniform, it's not a traditional costume. And she said, no, this is the pride of Singapore. I need to wear it up. And we told her, said, no, we will not let you win. And she said, it's okay. I just want to walk up there and show I'm proud of these SQ clothes over here. So somehow or another, there are some Singaporeans who actually see pride in the SQ uniform, but we try to educate people as much as we can that it is a uniform, but it is a uniform that reflects that a symbol of female beauty, especially Southeast Asian women's body. And it also goes to show that in the 1970s, where everybody is so particular about wearing tight bodice clothes, and Pierre Baumann is able to get inspired that, hey, I can do a costume that is quite couture in style with bustier done in the costume, and actually make it with batik prints and make it into a very nice uniform for Singapore Airlines. So somehow or another, if it's in today's context, I tell you, he might be penalized for cultural appropriation, really. But the thing is, if you see in that era, it goes to show that if a person is able to appreciate your culture and bring it forward to reflect the current people's taste, I think that is rather important, because that shows that the batik culture can evolve further in the future. And we should not just deny that this thing is not really good or bad, actually. Yeah, this is my take over here.
Oh, really, really interesting take on that batik uniform.
Yeah.
The SQ uniform.
Not batik.
It is not batik, yes. Inspired by, but it's not.
Yeah, in LaSalle, I actually tell my students, those kind of batiks will be known as textiles with batik prints.
Yes.
You don't call it batik. Yeah.
Yes. And with that, I think it's like a very good time to open up the floor and I would like to invite everyone who is here tonight to to give us your comments, thoughts, questions.
Actually, I like the comment that Yi Hui has made about politicians wearing batik. I think it's a great marketing strategy if a politician wears a batik. It is a very strong statement, but would the politician know exactly what he or she has on his or her body? As an example, a story in Indonesia when when Ahok was persecuted and he went to court to hear his judgment. Ahok is a Chinese chap, but Chinese Indonesian, and there were, two camps. And when he appeared in court, he wore a blue and white batik, bearing small parang motifs and flower motifs. And the entire community of batik enthusiasts in Jakarta, or researchers, went absolutely crazy trying to unpack the meaning behind what Ahok was wearing. Because it was a sad, sad day for him. And because it's a sad, sad day, the Chinese wear blue. Mourning is symbolized by the color, is represented by the color blue and white. And then the small little parangs, as the researchers were saying, the parang motifs, was that courage and warrior trait in him. But also the flowers was that peace-loving thing. And so what happened was a batik artist then decided to say, okay, who wants to commission that? And then I got a piece of that Ahok. If you actually go Google right now.
Nice.
So if you actually Google Ahok batik, you will see that blue and white thingy. So I got it for my husband as well.
I think to date it's still called Batik Ahok.
That's right. And then what happens is when I bought it for my husband, and my friend said, hey, very nice. And then I told her the story that this was actually Ahok's, Ahok wore that. And they refused to wear it because, you see, they are from another camp that did not support Ahok. So it's so interesting because politicians have a very strong position of power to tell these stories and to potentially advocate what we are doing in our little spaces, you know.
So on my side, I have one interesting case whereby one of my friend on Facebook actually was posting a photo of a Peranakan woman dressed in a light blue kebaya and a light blue sarong skirt at the voting station recently at our Singapore voting. So he took so much photos to the point that one of the Caucasian friends was saying, you're going to get sued if the lady knows that you're taking photos of her like that. And he was saying, no, he took a photo because he's really seeing people wearing kebayas out on events like this. And later on, one of her friends actually saying, hey, is this lady voting for WP? For the Workers' Party, because she's wearing light blue top with a light blue sarong. And surprisingly, people could actually, wearing sarongs and the kebaya with a typical color can actually sometimes give out a certain message that you do not want to say, but you are showing it out. So there are people who are like that actually in Singapore. Yeah.
Tony, you mentioned Raisa just now in the background. So yes, on when she went to Parliament for the first time for her swearing in, and so she came over to the store. I was so mighty excited. A young politician, plus young girl from the opposition that's going to be representing the voices of the opposition, and so she came and she picked the motif of batik tambal. And that spoke to her. And I told her that actually that was a symbol of protection and healing, which is so, so apt in a time like this. And then she wore the kebaya panjang. It was quite hilarious when suddenly after the first swearing in, everybody became fashion police, you know, and they said that, oh, why she wear the kebaya panjang? It's so frumpy. She was pregnant, for crying out loud, you know. Why did she wear the kebaya so long and all that? But the truth is, the kebaya panjang, or the baju panjang as you may know it, is a more formal dress code than the ones that are shorter that we're so familiar with. So I think it was a good decision that she made, and I was so happy to facilitate that politician going in wearing on her first day.
Yeah, it's really nice. Someone's asking about books, if there's any books to brush up on the knowledge. If you can just, hi Stella, if you can just type in or unmute which specific about
Hello.
Batik
Hi
top.
Tony. Hi Raymond. Hi Oniatta.
Hi, Stella.
Hi, Stella.
Hello. How are you? I mean,
Hello.
I have Cholin's book from many years ago, but in the case of moving and all that, I've kind of lost the copy. But I think I've always liked batik in the back. Okay, can't really see because I'm actually watching this from my handphone. Is this the Datin Endon one?
No.
Yeah, so so just wondering whether there are any good like basic primers and stuff like that. I mean, like I know Raymond knows like always like batik. Maybe it's really in the genes because like my mom loves batik. She's half Indon Chinese and she's half Peranakan, and I've always grown up with kebayas and batiks because of my late grandmother. My maternal grandmother stayed with us. In fact, I think I inherited some of her collection, but they're all in storage boxes somewhere. And ironically, my favorite piece was actually the blue and white pieces, which later on, as I grew up, I realized was actually meant for mourning in Peranakan culture, right? But those are my favorite. And I just sort of started getting into it. I don't wear it as sarongs and all, but I really wear it as like contemporary dresses and pieces. I think Tony knows what I'm talking about. But I'm just getting curious, and I've slowly started being exposed to like I like Pekalongan, I guess. I like Lasams as well. But I've also started discovering that there's actually Maduri's batik and a whole bunch of really interesting motifs and things. Yeah, so I just want to brush up on my reading because I think because of my own background, I just enjoy reading before I get into something. Yeah, thank you.
Stella, once you start getting into those acquisitions, it's a slippery slope. Don't say I didn't warn you.
It's going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. Yeah, collecting batiks is actually not a cheap hobby, actually.
Yeah.
And it seems endless when it comes to collecting batik, actually.
Respond to Stella's question about books, I think a lot of the good ones are no longer in print. So I would, if you're going to buy these books, which I do, it would be worth looking into avenues like Abe Books, ABE, is that how you pronounce it, Abe? Because they have, you type batik in it, Javanese batik. A lot of these books that are first editions, they may cost a bit with shipping and all that, and they smell really old too. And sometimes they're old copies with the author's signature if you strike lottery. But I think apart from the knowledge that you get out of reading it is the visual feast that a lot of these books offer. And then, of course, there's the one that I have building on batik, the globalization of the craft community, is a compilation of essays that were actually presentations done in the late 90s at a conference. I think in terms of reading as well, there is actually online quite a lot of academic material that is really interesting to read about shared cultures and why the Indonesians get very upset when someone says that, batik is being sold in our country, for example, without recognizing them. And it traces very respectfully the history of why the sense of ownership and pride is so strong that they would get offended by these things. So you can get them online as well, where papers are concerned, except that you probably have to pay for access. If you have a university account, then it's quite easy to access these readings. But you are most welcome to come to my place. I have a shelf of, I think it's a reasonably decent collection of books, Stella.
Yeah, so we have a question here from Hannah. So if Singapore's batik culture is borrowed or derived from the neighbors, what's next for batik in Singapore?
Well, that's a very difficult question. Oh my goodness. At the end of the day, we can only say that batik culture in Singapore, right, is actually really borrowed culture from our neighbors. Because Singapore, we are actually linked with, by history, we are linked with Indonesia, like Riau and Lingga. So there's a lot of borrowed cultures that definitely Singapore will definitely have. And moreover, like Oniatta had mentioned a while ago, Singapore used to be a major port, and till today it is. So at one stage, what is fashionable overseas and brought over to Singapore, it will come to Singapore. And people who are rich, they want the best stuff to be worn on their clothes or on their body. So batiks from Indonesia would be a very good example, like they would buy and use it onto their clothes. And that's why even after many years and decades down the road, young Singaporeans would always say that, oh, my grandmother would always wear Indonesian batik. And that is the look that they would be able to relate at the end of the day. So it's really very hard to say Singapore there's no Singapore batik. It's actually very sad, actually, because we are what we are, actually, a port where all the best things just come to us and we just buy it and use it.
My response to this is not so bleak lah. I think while we are not able to claim that it is ours, I think there is, if you ask about the future, what is next for batik in Singapore, and then Zainal Arifin has this lovely question which I could try to link to, what are some ways to encourage the younger generation to be involved? That for me is the future, to get the younger generation involved, and how I think it is through people like ourselves that advocate for the appreciation of batik to be heightened, that we don't just see it as a piece of cloth, that we see it beyond the art, that we demystify the process and acknowledge the friendships that we have with our neighbors. And that's where our strength is, where we are, where I am for that matter. And therefore, I think I'd like to propose that the word enthusiast gets one notch up as well, because then we're forcing it upon ourselves, me, Tony, Raymond, Hannah, and the likes of you who are here today, to elevate and heighten yourself as batik advocates. So there is an advocacy for this. There is a voice that that allows others to see batik as a technique, as a process, and that this is a labor-intensive piece of work, that there are people behind this, there are human beings that depend on batik as their livelihood, that without the support that we give in our purchases, when we wear it, of course we buy it, right, of course, and then when you wear your own grandmother's batik, all that is labor. And I think when you appreciate that by wearing, by buying the real deals, that allows us to heighten and elevate our appreciation towards batik. That, for me, is the future I'd like to continue to press on with.
All right, really nice. Probably I'll take one more question. Sabina, if you want to unmute and ask your question.
Yeah, what I want to ask about, because we're discussing now, like, does batik can be seen as Malay or Singaporean culture? The same thing is also happening here in the Netherlands. Like, people assume that if you're busy with batik, you are busy with batik because you're Indonesian or you have Indonesian roots. Can we see batik as something separate from Indonesian culture? Can it be something on its own? Or do we always have to appreciate it together with Indonesia, being Indonesian? That was my train of thoughts.
From my personal view, batik itself, like Oniatta mentioned a while ago, it is actually a wax resist technique. And in fact, if we know quite a lot about the history, we know that Indonesia had its textile industry actually started off much way earlier when the Europeans started bringing Indian textiles into Indonesia. So in fact, India has also batiks. And because of the trading from country to country over the years, you notice that this similar technique, whether you're using glutinous rice flour or wax itself, you notice that when it reaches the country itself, it evolves into a new fashion. For example, when the Indian textile, the wax resist, comes to Indonesia and goes up north to Japan, for instance, you notice that the Japanese appreciate the Indian chinks done with the wax resist so much that they make into kimonos and stuff, and they have the clothes as evidences in their museums back in Japan. And they love the batik prints, they love the Indian textile print so much that they evolve it into their current Yuzen. And it's often seen in their backgrounds that today it starts to have its own form of name, which is the Yuzen textiles. So in fact, Singapore, we can try to create our own style of batik, but it all goes down to whether what the younger generation wants to see and what they are willing to wear on their body. Because at the end of the day, if the younger generation don't appreciate batik, no matter how hard we try to promote it, it will still be a dying culture in Singapore. And a lot of the young people, the problem they face is that, yeah, they're interested in the culture, but the cultural traditions get too rigid that they cannot breathe. And there's a risk of becoming extraneous to the younger generation that, okay, if I wear the sarong like this and people complain this and that, I don't want to wear it at all, so I don't get any complaints. So we ourselves, we also have to think of our own actions on how we should be trying to educate these young people in a way that it not only teaches them the culture, it teaches them to also appreciate so much to a point that they can evolve on its own style, that what they appreciate for its current generation. So I think it all boils down to education at the end of the day. Yeah.
I agree with you, Raymond. I think where style is concerned, I've made the kabayas, for example, very loose-fitting, deliberate. But when we talk about the fabric itself, it's very hard for me to disassociate the Indonesian link there. I think because for me, and this is, I speak for myself, I think there is utmost respect and regard for the work that goes on with that one piece of cloth, with a maker behind that piece of cloth, which we must never forget. And I think that link is very hard for me to disassociate, because these are not printed in bales. And that's why we can forget that a fabric has come from China. We don't celebrate the Chinese craftsman because it is a machine. It is not a craftsman. But where the Indonesian side is concerned, or where anywhere for that matter, if there is a craftsman, we acknowledge that maker. And I think where Indonesia is concerned, I cannot remove myself from that link. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, certainly. Yeah, yeah. I agree with both, but that's the whole issue, I think, because if we are appreciating batiks coming from Java, that has its own unique way of history being written within the cloth itself. But if you're looking at new designs, I mean, whole of West Africa also makes batik, have their own patterns. So you have both these dualities in it. And also with, I think, yeah, batik is a technique, but it's also a heritage. Like maybe it's two things and not one. and that would make it easier if we look at that from both angles, like if we're talking about batik coming from Indonesia or batik coming from anywhere else in the world. So.
That's why there's a recent case where SCMP actually showed a video on Yunnan doing their blue and white batiks. And because it is an English video, they actually indicated over there Chinese batiks. And this sparked out a huge uproar from Indonesians. And personally, I feel that the word batik over the years, yes, it originated from Indonesia. But the thing is, over the years, academics have reached a point that as long as it is a dye resist technique, they'll just call it batik. So that's why if you have a similar technique done in Africa and you call it batik, I guess that you'll find that people will always get the misconception that, oh, it must be related to Indonesia. So maybe we should try to think of another word, another naming convention that would actually not offend the Indonesian neighbors, but yet we can appreciate each other's textiles in its own way. Or maybe we should just call it, or it's just dye resist technique or dye resist textile. Just don't use the word batik. You know what I mean? Because somehow or another, the Chinese call it la rampu, which is wax resist cloth. And if you go to the English convention in the dictionary, it's called batik. So how are you going to penalize the Chinese for using the word batik just because they couldn't find a suitable word to put it there? So somehow or another, the naming convention, the word batik itself, has reached a point that it is solely for Indonesia. I personally feel that if we create any textiles that is of a dye resist technique, you just call it Singapore textile or whatever, just don't call it batik. And you won't get into any trouble with our Malaysian neighbors or even our Indonesian neighbors too, actually. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, thank you so much for that discussion. It definitely is, part of it is to increase the awareness of what actually is batik, and is to get like all the different people who are interested to be involved to create that sense of batik culture in their own respective communities or countries. And that is a perfect transition for me to introduce my project. So if Hannah can help me to share the screens. But that is exactly the genesis of why I started this project. So if we go to the next slide, this conversation is actually just the beginning of our journey into finding out about Singapore identity through batik textile art. So yeah, so every time we go around our conversation on social media or during events and workshops and stuff, the discussion about batik in Singapore always comes back to what is Singapore batik. And as we have discussed earlier, that Singapore being a trader's town, people just like go through, they get the textile goods from somewhere and then to be traded or sold off elsewhere. So with this project, we would like to invite people who are currently residing in Singapore to reflect about their Singapore identity and create a a batik art with them. So we will send out batik kits to Singaporeans or Singapore residents, and then they will create their artwork, and then they will collect it back. They will upload their artwork, and then we will analyze the artworks together with the descriptions that they give, and we'll try to come up with a collaborative art project, which in what form, we do not know yet. It depends on the feeds that we get from the participants. And if you go back to the earlier slides, Hannah, so it's also paying an homage to the collaborative process of batik making, because the beautiful batik that we have seen so far, they are almost never being produced or made by a single one person. It's a collaborative of a few artisans, each having their own skill set. So they add on layers of their skills and creative energies into building what is this beautiful piece of batik. So similarly, in our project, we would like to have people who started the journey as a personal creative endeavors, and then we collect all these different artwork and we try to come up with something that is collaborative and represents the community of participants who join in the project. And so how you can join us, which is on the next slide, is you can register at www.batikinfinity.com/register, and you pay a $10 registration/commitment fee, and we will send you the batik DIY kit as well as link to the instructions. So after that, you can create your own artwork, and then you will upload it to the website together with a short text description, and you upload it back before 6th of December, and we will analyze the artwork and we create into that collaborative art. On what is inside the kit is a tools to get you started on your batik journey. And if you are asking where is the chanting and the hot wax, this batik is assembled based on batik simbut, which is using the glutinous rice paste as the dye resist instead. So this is very safe, it's family friendly and eco-friendly, I guess. And the canvas that you will be working on comes with a drawstring and the handle. So you can use that for your, as a tote bag or as a drawstring pouch. So it's very usable as well. And oh yes, so once you uploaded the artwork and it is deemed successful, we will refund back the $10. So essentially you start with this project and you get yourself a personalized, customized art batik tote bag that is free. So yes. And after that, come back in around December, January timeframe to view all the artworks from all the participants on the website www.batikinfinity.com as well. And in the next slide, finally, what's next? For those of you who are in Singapore, unfortunately, this project is only open to residents in Singapore. For those overseas, we might do something really soon, but yeah, just stay tuned. So for those who are in Singapore, we are having a batik kit collection at the Green Collective at Funan tomorrow. So I'll be there between 1 to 7. So if you just would like to drop by. And tomorrow is the batik day. So yeah, feel free to say hi in your best batik and we will treat you with a little something. And if you are one who need like technical guidance, or you just want to create some art with your friends, or just want to vibe off creative energies from other participants, you can come down to the Batik Circle session, which is an in-person session at the Local Lacquer Maker Studio at Kampung Glam on the 24th of October at 3 p.m. with a small fee of $20 and $10 including the registration kit. Registration fee for the kit, which will be refunded after you upload the artwork. Yeah, keep on following us on Instagram at batik.infinity for more updates as we share the journey into finding out Singapore identity through batik, and email us at batikinfinity@gmail.com for any queries. And finally, a plug for the project. The project is organized by aNERDgallery and it's part of SG Culture Anywhere, and it's supported by National Arts Council Singapore, Baju by Oniatta, and Rumah Kim Choo. So I would like to thank Oniatta and Raymond for all their support, and especially for being here tonight to give their valuable insights to the identity and batik culture in Singapore. Yes. And with that, thank you so much again for joining us tonight. We hope this opens up a new conversation and provides a new perspective of batik beyond the piece of clothes that my grandma used to wear. And I will stop the recording shortly, but I will stay behind for a couple more minutes if anyone has any questions or any comments and would like to carry on with the discussion. So thank you and hope to see your registration, and have a great evening, everybody.